So by now, hopefully you've watched the lecture just on the content of saving, which should be online, as well as the previous video just talking about the Photoshop interface. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the exact process you would need to do an assignment. Here's an example image sequence. This is a moment-to-moment sequence where you can kind of see that in the first image you have two kids working on Legos, and the second image is just a moment later where they realize the photo is being taken and smile at the camera. Okay, and maybe this isn't the greatest one ever, but I just want to put something together quick. But an example of a moment-to-moment sequence, and if you want to think about, what does this do compared to just a single image, it kind of captures that, oh, we were working, then we realized we were getting our picture taken. It just, the addition of, the image sequence, it adds a little bit more depth, it adds a little bit more information, and that's why, in this class we're doing graphics, but, you have to understand, yes, one image is good, but an image sequence oftentimes is better. Another example from this class, or an example project, would be this one. Here's sort of an action sequence, and a fantastic action sequence, but this is like this sort of robot battle competition that I judge. So the robots are in one place in one, and the robots are in another place in another. In this one actually I wouldn't give myself that great of a grade on because it's tough to connect the two. Like I was there, and so I can kind of see, if you can see where my mouse is, like this robot is turning, but it's kind of blurry here, and so, but this would be an example of an action sequence where, something significant is happening one place to another. And these both have two images. You could have as few as two, you could have up to four or so if you want to. It really depends on what you're trying to produce, and that's, again, something that I'll say over and over in this class is think about what you want your images to say. Don't dwell on the Photoshop, don't dwell on anything other than what are you trying to communicate. Okay, so how did I do this? Well, let's switch over to Photoshop, and first thing we're going to do is open the images that we want to use and then take a very close look at their resolution, because it's just, as I said earlier, it's something you want to be aware of. And so we will use these two images from the girls with the Legos. These are actually my daughters opening some birthday Legos. So first things first, if you hold down Shift on the keyboard or you use Control, you can actually open up multiple things at the same time. You really want to get away from double clicking. JPEGs are used in a lot of applications, so therefore if you double click on it, you're not going to get, it's not going to open in the program you want. JPEGs are used in thousands of programs, and then there's a double problem that if you double click on a JPEG, it's going to open it in who knows what, and then that image being open means that another program that wants to open it might not be able to do so. Okay, so I open up the images. You can see in the tabs that has the image names as well as what scale we're seeing it. These are at 1/4 size, meaning these images technically are 4 times larger than what we're seeing here, 25%. So I go to View and I say Actual Pixels, and you can see that, oh, much larger image. And I'll go back to View, Fit on Screen. Okay, so now before we do anything, and in many ways I'm being a bad example because you really want to plan on paper. The tools are fun, tools are sexy, and so therefore you might say to yourself, let's get right into Photoshop. But realistically, you should be planning anything that you make. Sketch it out. Sketching is much more natural. The computer does not get in the way, and so let's think about it. Well, first, I want, if you read the assignment spec, I want these images no larger than 1920 pixels wide and 1080 pixels tall. The reason is that's the resolution of an HD television set, or at least a good HD television set. And because we're not making these to print out, we're just making these to view on screen. That's there are screens obviously with higher resolution, but that's the resolution that I want. It just makes sense. And so then what we're going to need to do is the math. Well, if I'm doing a image sequence that has 3, well then, I can't really make each one much more than 600 pixels wide, because that times 3 would be 1800 pixels. That would be most of the screen. Okay, and so you might want to sketch it out depending on how comfortable you are with Photoshop, how your ability to do mental math. But anything you make will be generally made better if you sketch it out and plan. The more planning you do. So in my case, since we only have 2 images, I'm going to make each one about 800 pixels wide. So I'll have like a box about 800, another box about 800. And the whole document doesn't have to be 1920 by 1080. It just can't be larger than that. I don't want the width larger than this number. I don't want the height larger than 1080. So back over to Photoshop. So again, I figured it out on paper that this image, so I go to image, as I said, this is generally for whole document manipulations, and I'm going to change my width to 800. You can see that the height changes with it. So I hit OK. It looks tiny, but remember, we got to stay aware of this percentage up here, super important. Oh, this is actually 1/3 of its normal size. So I go View, Fit on Screen, and 147. This is actually larger. So I'm going to go back and say actual pixels. Let's see how big it really is. That big. Perfect. Go to this one, which again is right now we're seeing it at 1/4 of its size. So now I'm going to go to image size. I'm going to change the width to 800. Looks tiny, but again, it's 4 times this big. So now say View, Actual Pixels, and I can see how big it is. Now, in my image sequence, the idea is that the girls are playing Legos. They become aware their picture is being taken. They look at the camera and smile. So that is my moment-to-moment sequence. It's not a lot of action, anything like that. I'm not changing really the focus of the photo, so it's just a moment-to-moment image sequence. A number 1, if you look at reading from chapter 3. And so anyway, so I need to make room. This document is only 800 wide by 600 tall. I need to add some real estate over to the right in order to get there. And so I'm going to say image, canvas size. And again, this is a manipulation that impacts the entire document. So I go to image, and I'm going to want it to grow out to the right. So I click here, and you can see it. That means sort of indicate expanding to the right. And then here's a big danger zone. Oh my God, I'm yawning on my video. How inappropriate. And so, anyway, but the idea here is that my width, okay, I don't want to work in inches. And this is where a lot of the real common rookie mistake is someone goes in here and they types like, I want to be 800, and they type in 800 inches, which is huge. There's 300 pixels an inch potentially, so or more. So I switch this to pixels. Really important, and then I'm going to make it 1600, but before I hit return, I'm actually going to make it 1610 because I want to have a little bit of a gutter in between. I hit OK. Alright, so now it adds canvas. It adds a big space over here to my document. So my document now is nice and wide. I take this bad boy, and then I say select, because remember we're telling it what part of the image we want. We're going to say select all because we want the whole thing. Edit, copy to copy it, and then I'm going to go over back to my original one and edit paste. And when I paste it, it actually is going to put the image there, but it puts it there in a layer. And if you look where I'm leaving my mouse, it's over the move tool, and that's when you want to, again, remember the tools are when you're clicking on the image. I'm going to click in here, and I can actually move this around if I want, if it didn't paste it where you wanted it. And then remember how these images are 800 pixels wide. I made the whole width 1610, so I'd have room for a 10 pixel gutter here. Then what I do, but I want 10 pixels on the top and 10 pixels at the bottom. The reason this is white is my background color is white. And so I'm going to go to canvas size, and I'm just going to add a little canvas at the top and the bottom. So I go to pixels here, and I'm going to add 20 to both of these numbers. And 20 because that way it'll be divided evenly. As you can see here that the expansion is going to be evenly distributed around the outside. So when I hit OK, I get a nice white border around the outside. There we go. For some reason, oh, I think I might have only added 10. Did I make a mistake there? Oh, with 1620. Yep, I did. Your professor does not know how to use math. 1630. I should have added 20 to there, and there you go. All right, so now I have my image sequence. Now, you can see with layers, if I wanted to save those layers, I have to save this as a PSD file, kind of as indicated in the lecture. A Photoshop document is where it's going to save it in a way that you can work on it in the future. And so now I can go to the File pull-down menu, though, and say Save As. You know, you don't want to just hit Save because that's going to save it over the original. And then, again, a PSD is if I want to save the layers, I want to save it in a way that I can work on in the future. But what I really want to do here is save it as a JPEG. Okay, and because that's what you're going to turn into me, and I'll call mine Sequence 1. I'll call it Seq1. Okay, then you're going to see the slider that I talked about. You know, do I want a very small file on my disk? You know, and it's confusing because when I say small, do I mean a small resolution? Do I mean low quality? Do I mean whatever? This means just file size, small file size, but very low image quality, a high level of compression. This means a larger file size. You can see 300K or whatever, but it means more room on my disk. And so I hit OK, and it saves it. Okay, but then the other thing that you're going to want to do, I just saved it here. You know, to double check, I go to image size, and you can see that my width is less than 1920. My height is less than 1080, so I know that I have done this correctly. I've got 2 images in the sequence, and I have met the requirement of our file size, or the file resolution. So anyway, that's our first assignment, and I will link to some other assignments, some other tutorials that will take you through individual more details on canvas size, more detail on image size. You don't have to watch those, but if you find yourself getting hung up on a particular aspect of this assignment, you might want to check the additional tutorials, or just feel free to look me up on Skype.